With us in the studio is Dr. Nicole Curato, a political analyst and a sociology professor at the University of the Philippines, and she'll talk about how Philippine politics shaped up this year and her forecast for next year. She's also a post-doctoral research fellow at the Center for Deliberative Democracy and Global Governance at the Australian National University. This year, she's recognized as one of the outstanding young men for her leadership and excellence in the field of sociology. Good morning and welcome back to Solar Daybreak.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to be here.
Well, congratulations first of all for that award. Now, how significant is the TOEM award?
I'm very happy with the award, of course, but I think even more important for me is that this year, a lot of researchers got the award. So of the 9 awardees this year, I think 3 or 4 of us come from the field of research. I think that's a very important indication that the JCs and the nominating committee really put premium on the industry of creating ideas, that creating ideas is important for nation building, it's a form of heroism, and that we have to shape the intellectual discourse in this country in a very creative way. So I think that's outstanding for this year. I mean, it's a year of researchers, so I'm very happy about that.
Well, for those who are still about to do some research, at least you know, sometimes we just go over these researches, and we don't really take note of it, of how significant it is in shaping up or in making decisions. So I am glad that at least it is being recognized now.
Yes, because usually when people look at achievements, they look at quick impacts right away. But research is not like that. The gestation period of ideas and knowledge takes time. So I think by recognizing the importance of research and creating ideas, then we send the message that yes, it's important for us to take things slowly, think about it, and don't have quick reactions on whether it's science, social sciences, or technology. These things take time, and it's a good acknowledgement that yes, we have to recognize the achievements of scholars.
Well, congratulations once again. Now, the last time you were here, we were talking about the president's speech, and then you were telling us about how he was a cheerleader and how he was being a morale booster for the country and talking about his achievements. But recently you wrote an article, and then you did say that from the cheerleader, the president is now a spin doctor.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, it's very fascinating that we're doing this year-end assessment, because I remember I was here 5-6 months ago talking about the SONA, and we were talking about how the president set the tone of public discussion by emphasizing all of his achievements. And 5-6 months down the road, we're now seeing a more defensive president. It's a president that tries to respond to criticisms rather than setting the tone of discussion. Of course, I'm referring to the DAP controversy here when he made that a 15-minute speech. Defending his policy, but that's not even the end of it yet. We've seen how the president has tried to spin the discussion when it comes to national calamity response, on how the government did everything it can in a post-Yolanda relief efforts. So, of course, we appreciate a government that is responsive. We appreciate a government that tries to address criticisms. But an even stronger government, I think, is a government that can set the tone for discussion. And I don't really see that with this administration at this point. It's just more responsive towards criticism rather than successfully shaping public discourse. So to me, that, in a way, is a certain weakness of communicating to the public.
What was he communicating to the public? What were these messages that he was sending with what he was saying to us during those times?
Predominantly, he's still banking on his moral ascendancy, which is fine. He ran on a campaign that he's a moral person, that he is surrounded by moral people. But remember that 2014 in particular are the final 2 years of his presidency. And his morality is not in question anyway, at least for a lot of people. Of course, there are some people who try to contest that as well. But I think a more progressive approach to politics is an emphasis towards the institutionalization of what we want to happen towards the last 2 years. So for example, at this point in a post-Yolanda reconstruction context, I would like to see the master plan, for example. So it's not enough to say that we are doing our best, we are making sure that there's no corruption. Of course, that should be part of it. But in terms of the grand plan, what is the blueprint? We have to see that at this point. And the same is true for all the other issues that the president wishes to resolve at the end of his presidency. Good governance, for example. Of course, he can claim that he has gained headway in a lot of reforms. But in terms of clear reforms that are sustainable after he steps down, we still have to see a lot of discussion about that. FOI is just one example. But if we try to look back on the campaign issues on 2013, right? We talked about political dynasties a lot. We talked about campaign financing a lot, party list system reform. After the elections, we haven't seen a lot of efforts on the part of government to actually institutionalize process. Just so in the following election in 2016, we're not faced with the same issues anymore, or we can at least see some improvement. So I think that's where it's lacking at the moment. We are overly relying on the virtuous character of the administration.
Good versus evil.
Yes, that framing of the debate, which I think is effective at the start of his administration because he's pitching his administration in opposition to the GMA administration. But if we want to have a more progressive approach to a 2016 debate on what's important, what the issues are, then we have to talk about policy and we have to talk about approaches to social issues that are more institutionalized in nature.
Do you think that has affected his rating because of what you indicated?
It's always difficult to interpret survey data because we only see trends, right? So we can only speculate, but perhaps that's one of the reasons. But there are a lot of other factors. For example,
what are the other factors?
If we try to compare it, for example, with a survey on hunger, a lot of Filipinos still say that they're hungry. A lot of Filipinos still say that they haven't sensed an improvement in their economic well-being. So it could also be related to that, right? So even if the president has done a lot of good things for the country based on other people's perception, there is also still this perception based on survey data that the quality of life hasn't improved.
Do you see this downward trend in the performance rating of the president in 2014?
Again, it's very difficult to speculate, so I would probably hold
with
back
the
on my
indicators
answer.
that you're seeing now.
Yes, I guess the challenge is the delivery of all the promises, for example, on inclusive growth, right? That is one of the main pillars of the Aquino administration, inclusive growth. And as long as there are no substantive reforms when it comes to the economic policy, when it comes to the delivery of social services, then probably we can anticipate to a certain extent that the trend will continue as long as the basic indicators for well-being are unchanged.
Now, what about the national issues of 2013, particularly the PDAF, the DAP, and of course the feud between senators, and of course all these other things? How will this affect the public's perception and attitude toward, or how has it affected the public's perception and attitude towards our lawmakers?
Right. Again, we have to wait for survey results to validate public perception. But I think one way of responding to that question is to just think about expectations. What can we reasonably expect as decent citizens? What can we reasonably expect from our politicians in the coming year? And I'm particularly worried about this because now we are seeing posturing of politicians for 2016. So maybe I'm a bit of a pessimist when it comes to that. That yes, of course, politicians will behave in a particular way to get public attention. But what's more important is how the public reacts to this. So instead of probably me trying to expect more from our politicians, I'm trying to expect more from the public, more from the citizens, and trying to insist on the right conduct for politicians. I mean, we've seen this, for example, in the viral video of Makati Mayor Junjun Binay, right? And the public outrage when it comes to that, in a way, creates norms of what's correct and what's incorrect. The public outrage against PDAF, for example, the Million People March is one of the highlights of this year, is again an indication of citizens responding to improper behavior of government officials. So I think instead of saying that politicians should do this, should do that, I think the onus obviously is on the citizens to put pressure on politicians to make sure things change.
One of the things also that you've written about, speaking of citizens, is that with the onset of Yolanda and the other natural calamities that we've experienced in 2013, you did talk about citizenship and compassion.
Right, yes.
Yes, and can you tell us more about that? Because what you wrote was that it's not just a knee-jerk reaction of helping out. You were talking about something that's more sustainable.
Right. One of course, the natural probably reactions when it comes to calamities is the solidarity that comes out of it. There's huge literature in the sociology of disasters that even though we see a lot of chaos in the post-disaster context, solidarity emerges. You see people helping out each other, you see fellow citizens trying to reach out even if the calamity is quite distant from Metro Manila, for example. A lot of this is understood within the context of compassion. Like there's compassionate citizenship after disasters, which is fine. But the argument I'm trying to make is it's not enough. If we want to get serious, the politics of compassion is not enough. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's not enough that we give. It's also more important that we try to take part in the reconstruction efforts. It's also important, for example, for entrepreneurs to go there, invest, and make sure that the city is rebuilt in a proper way. So there are other things that we can do as citizens to make sure that things like this do not happen again. So it's not just about, for example, giving money. It's also about taking part in a discussion on climate change, trying to change our lifestyle. The bottom line being, it could happen to anyone. Extreme weather events can affect anyone.
Yes.
And the solidarity required of us is not just of compassion, but it's an acknowledgement that we are in this together. So a lot of that has to do with our collective effort to make sure that whether this hits Metro Manila or whether this hits Visayas, we have proper mechanisms to make sure that we can adequately respond to these disasters.
Do you think we can adequately respond in the coming years, like by 2014, considering this is already what's happening now?
Well, on the institutional level, a lot of things still have to be done. There have been proposals on creating a separate agency, right, for disaster risk and reduction. Of course, now we have a rehabilitation czar, but I think we have to have more foresight when it comes to this. Disasters, the 21st century is a century of disasters, that's what they say. We live in a risk society, a global risk society. So it's not enough that we just react. It's important that we anticipate and have mechanisms that can immediately react every time disasters happen.
What did it show of our leadership?
Oh, okay, that's a very tough question. If we look at the broader context, my impression of the post-Yolanda response is really indicative of how the administration has performed throughout the years, in the sense that it has become a quite reactive administration. Like what I said, for example, in the pork barrel PDAF controversy, the way the president responds to these issues is to, instead of setting the tone of the discussion, it's really more about trying to have a feel for what the public feels. It's about responding to the public pressure. But if you are, in my impression, if you are a government with a strong mandate, if you are a government with still high trust ratings, you have political capital to do something more drastic. So I think whether it's the case of Yolanda, whether it's the case of PDAF, more can be done. I think that's where my frustration is coming from. We know that the president is a strong president in terms of the ratings. So there is more expectations that more brave and more sustainable reforms can be done.
So with what we've seen so far and the indicators which you've identified so far, do you think it will affect the voting behavior of the Filipinos? Or it has affected the voting behavior of the Filipinos in some way?
Yes, it's very hard to say because as we know, the Philippine political system is very unpredictable. A lot can still happen before 2016. But I think what's more important is rather than focusing on thinking about how Filipinos will vote in 2016, I think more political capital and effort should be channeled towards how can we make sure that the vote in 2016 is more sacred, that it's not compromised, that regardless of who's running, people have a fair set of options that they can choose from. So I think more effort should be done towards that rather than thinking about, well, who are the candidates that we can pick. I mean, I think the better discussion to have is how can we make sure that the 2016 will be an election that has integrity, that has a fair range of choices, which entails revisiting all the issues that we talked about in this election and in the 2010 elections.
And lastly, what's your hope for Philippine politics in 2014?
Okay, my hope for Philippine politics, okay, maybe if I can have a wish list, I would like freedom of information, social justice, and LGBT equality. That's my top three wish list.
Thank you so much for joining us again here in Solar Daybreak, and congratulations. And we look forward to hearing more of your ideas and, of course, your research work in sociology as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Nicole Curato.